He walked 3 miles in a torn shoe every day. What his teacher did next shocked everyone. Welcome to our storytelling channel, where every story touches the heart. If you're enjoying this video, take a moment to comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from viewers around the world. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. It's emotional, powerful, and might just change the way you see the world. In a quiet corner of rural Arkansas, where the morning fog hangs low over endless fields and dirt roads stretch out like forgotten memories, lived a 12-year-old boy named Ethan Carter. He wasn't the kind of kid you'd notice in a crowd. He didn't wear fancy clothes, didn't carry the newest backpack, and certainly didn't complain. But there was something remarkable about him, something quietly brave. Every morning, just before the sun broke through the mist, Ethan would set off for school, walking more than 3 miles along gravel paths and back roads. He didn't have a bike or a ride. What he did have was determination and a pair of mismatched shoes that told a story all on their own. One was an old sneaker with the sole nearly torn off. The other foot was wrapped in a worn-out piece of cloth, tied tightly with string to protect it from the cold earth. His grandmother, Margaret, was 76. She had raised him alone since his parents died in a car accident when he was just a toddler. They lived in a leaning wooden shack on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, 1 tiny stove, and barely enough heat to make it through the Arkansas winters. Yet, despite her aching joints and fading eyesight, Margaret never let Ethan feel like he was less than anyone else. She worked day and night collecting recyclables, picking wild greens from nearby woods, and patching up their clothes by hand. Every evening, she would boil water over the fire and help Ethan wash his feet, gently unwrapping the cloth, whispering prayers over his tired little legs. Ethan didn't mind the walk. In fact, he liked the quiet. He would count birds, listen to the sound of his own footsteps, and dream, not about toys or games, but about being someone who could help others, someone who made people feel seen, like his grandmother made him feel. At school, Ethan rarely spoke unless spoken to. He sat in the back of the classroom, scribbling notes, with a stubby pencil and always handing in his homework, neatly written, full of effort. The other kids had no idea how far he walked, how hard he tried, or how much he carried for someone so young. But one person noticed. Mr. James Porter, his homeroom teacher, had watched Ethan for weeks. He saw the tattered shoes, the pale fingers, rubbed raw from the cold, and the quiet resilience in the boy's eyes. It stirred something deep in him, a reminder that some kids didn't just show up for school. They fought to get there, and that realization would set something beautiful in motion. Mr. James Porter wasn't the kind of teacher who missed details. A 42-year-old with a calm demeanor and eyes that had seen more than he ever let on, Mr. Porter had taught hundreds of students over the years. But something about Ethan Carter pulled at him in a different way. Maybe it was the quiet focus. Maybe it was the determination masked behind tired eyes. Or maybe it was that haunting walk Ethan made every morning through frost and mud, his feet barely covered, his shoulders braced against the wind. It was a bitter Tuesday morning in January when everything changed. Mr. Porter arrived at school early, like he always did. He was sipping lukewarm coffee, organizing lesson plans when he saw Ethan arrive, 10 minutes early, as usual. But today the boy looked different. His cloth-wrapped foot was soaked, turning dark from the cold. His face was pale, his lips slightly blue. And still, he nodded politely as he entered the room, sat at his desk, and pulled out his worn notebook like everything was fine. But it wasn't. That image stayed with Mr. Porter all day. It followed him home that night. After dinner, he set down his fork, pushed away his plate, and told his wife, "I need to check on someone." He didn't drive a fancy car. His truck was older than some of his students, but it got him where he needed to go, down the back roads, past the river, and into a part of town most people forgot about. He slowed as he reached a tiny shack with peeling paint and a crooked porch. The mailbox read Carter in faded marker. Mr. Porter parked and walked up quietly, Through the window, he saw Ethan and his grandmother, sitting by a small fire. She was wrapping his foot in a fresh piece of cloth, hands shaking from age. Ethan looked tired, but he was smiling, telling her about something he'd read in class. There was no self-pity, no complaints, just love, just survival. He didn't knock. He couldn't. Not then. Not while they were holding each other up like that. He stood in silence for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of it all, the strength, the pride, the quiet dignity. Then he turned back to his truck, got in, and sat behind the wheel with his hands trembling. He'd seen poverty before, but this was different. This was a boy who showed up every day when he had every reason not to. A boy who didn't ask for help, but needed it more than most. And in that moment, Mr. Porter made a decision. If the world wouldn't give Ethan a break, he would, not out of pity, not out of charity, but because some kids fight battles they never speak of, and someone has to notice. The next morning, something shifted in Mr. Porter. He stood in front of his class with his usual calm, but his mind was already racing. As the students filed in, chatting about homework and weekend plans, he glanced at Ethan, who sat in his usual spot, one foot still wrapped in cloth, but posture straight as ever. The boy had no idea that someone had stood outside his window the night before, that someone had seen the truth he never spoke of. That day, Mr. Porter introduced something he called the kindness exchange. We're starting a new classroom. Tradition, he announced, tapping the whiteboard. Once a month, we'll hold a surprise swap. Everyone brings something small, something they own, and we'll randomly share these gifts with each other. No names, no judgment, just kindness. The four. Class buzzed with curiosity. A few groaned, others shrugged. But Ethan nodded, quietly, like he understood the point better than anyone. Over the next few days, students brought in small items, keychains, colored pencils, gently used toys. Ethan, unsure of what to give, slipped a half-used notebook into his backpack. It wasn't much, but it was his best, pages clean, his handwriting neat. He didn't have toys or trinkets, just effort. The morning of the exchange, Mr. Porter arrived early with a small shoebox under his arm, carefully taped shut. No one saw him place it under Ethan's desk. No one saw the look in his eyes, the mix of hope, nerves, and quiet urgency The game began. Each student pulled a random item from the gift box Mr. Porter had set up. Laughs broke out. A few groaned at the silly gifts. But Ethan sat patiently, unsure when or what he was supposed to receive. Then, when the classroom settled and Mr. Porter began to teach, Ethan reached under his desk to grab a pencil and froze. There it was, a brand new pair of sneakers. Size 6, navy blue with white soles, perfectly clean. They weren't flashy, but to Ethan they looked like something from a dream. His hand hovered over them for a second before he touched them, half expecting them to vanish. Inside the box was a folded note. For the miles you walk, for the strength you carry, you are seen. Ethan didn't cry. He didn't say a word. He just looked up at Mr. Porter. Their eyes met for a brief moment, long enough for Ethan to know, long enough for Mr. Porter to nod just once. And then class continued like normal. But nothing was normal after that, because sometimes the most life-changing moments don't come with applause or fanfare. Sometimes they come in a shoebox, under a desk, in the quiet corners of a classroom, where a child learns, maybe for the first time, that the world can be kind. 15 years passed like pages turning in a quiet book. Ethan Carter was no longer the boy with mismatched shoes. He was now Dr. Ethan Carter, 27 years old, a licensed physician, recently graduated with honors from a respected medical school. But he never forgot where he came from, or who helped him take that first step forward. While many of his peers chased big city hospitals and six-figure salaries, Ethan returned to the same rural town that raised him. The roads were still dusty. The air still smelled of pine and soil. The old wooden shack where he grew up had collapsed in a storm 2 winters ago, and his grandmother had passed peacefully not long after. She never got to see him wear a white coat, but she knew, deep down, that he would. With the little savings he had and some help from nonprofit grants, Ethan opened a small clinic just a mile from where he used to walk to school. It wasn't fancy. The walls were thin, the chairs were donated, and the medical equipment was secondhand. But it was his, and more importantly, it was theirs. For the farmers with aching backs, the mothers who couldn't afford a doctor's visit, and the children who reminded him of himself. This clinic was a lifeline. Word spread quickly. A doctor who wouldn't charge if you couldn't pay. A man who treated patients like neighbors, not numbers. People came from miles around, and Ethan treated each one with patience and care. He stayed late. He made house calls. He never forgot the faces of those who thanked him with eggs, quilts, or a simple handshake, because that's how the town showed love. One afternoon, as he was cleaning up after a long day, Ethan noticed a man sitting quietly in the waiting room. He had white hair now, a cane resting beside him, and eyes that had grown softer with time. Ethan's heart skipped. It was Mr. James Porter. Time had changed him, but Ethan knew that face. He'd memorized it. That man had changed his life with a pair of shoes and an act of unseen kindness. And now, all these years later, he sat alone, waiting, not as a teacher, but as a patient. Ethan didn't call his name. He simply walked over, kneeled down, and placed his hand gently on the old man's shoulder. "Mr. Porter," he said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "It's my turn now." He helped the man to his feet, led him to the exam room, and treated him with the same care Mr. Porter once gave without words. And before the day ended, Ethan reached into a cabinet and pulled out a box. Inside was a pair of comfortable leather shoes, polished and warm. He knelt again and slid them onto the teacher's tired feet. For every mile Ethan had walked, this was the moment he had been walking toward. Mr. James Porter looked down at the polished leather, shoes on his feet, sturdy, warm, and perfectly fitted, and for the first time in years he found himself speechless. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from something deeper, something heavier. Gratitude, surprise, maybe even pride. He looked up at Ethan, the boy who had once walked through snow and mud with nothing but cloth around his foot. Now, a man standing tall in a white coat filled with purpose. The roles had reversed, but the respect between them had only deepened. "I didn't expect this," Mr. Porter said, his voice hoarse. "I did," Ethan replied softly. "Because you saw me when no one else did." They sat together for a while after the checkup, not as doctor and patient, not even as teacher and student, but as two people bound by a quiet, powerful thread. Compassion. Mr. Porter shared how he had retired a few years back, how he sometimes wondered if he'd made a difference in anyone's life. Ethan listened, then reached into his drawer and pulled out something he had kept all these years, a folded piece of paper, yellowed with time. It was the note that came with the sneakers long ago. "For the miles you walk, for the strength you carry, you are seen." Mr. Porter blinked hard, his throat tight. He had written dozens of notes like that to his students, most anonymously, but he never thought any of them had survived. Yet here it was, worn at the edges but still whole, still remembered. "You saved that?" he asked. Ethan smiled. "It saved me." The next day, Mr. Porter returned to the clinic, not for a checkup, but to help. He offered to volunteer a few hours a week, managing files, reading stories to kids in the waiting room, even organizing a small bookshelf in the lobby. It became a ritual. Every Tuesday and Thursday, rain or shine, he came with a thermos of coffee and a gentle smile. People in the town began to notice. The story of Ethan and Mr. Porter spread, not as gossip, but as a reminder that kindness, when planted in good soil, can grow into something unimaginable. Parents told their kids, teachers spoke of it in classrooms, and children, some of whom came in with shoes barely hanging on, started looking at Dr. Carter not just as a physician, but as proof that someone out there would always believe in. The Ethan's clinic eventually expanded. Donations rolled in. A second building was constructed, but in the front lobby of the original clinic, behind a glass frame, hangs that old note, next to a pair of worn-out sneakers. Not as decoration, but as a symbol that small acts echo louder than we think. That one teacher, one moment, one pair of shoes can change the course of a life, and that sometimes the greatest stories aren't written in books. They're walked into existence, one step at a time. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had someone believe in you when no one else did? Maybe it was a teacher, a neighbor, a stranger, someone who saw your potential when the world looked the other way. Or maybe you were that person for someone else. Stories like Ethan and Mr. Porter's remind us that even the smallest acts of kindness can echo for years and change a life forever. Take a moment to scroll down and share your story in the comments. Where are you watching from? What part of this journey touched you the most? Your voice matters here, and your words might inspire someone else who's watching right now. Don't hold back. Also, if you believe more people should see stories like this, consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. We share new, meaningful stories every day, and tomorrow's may be even more powerful. Together, let's build a community rooted in empathy, gratitude, and connection, because the world needs more of that right now. So go ahead, leave your thoughts below. We're reading every single one.